Welcome to the Leadership Levers Podcast. I'm your host, Will Gladhart, CMO at the Culture Think Tank. At the Culture Think Tank, we empower leaders with metrics that strengthen culture, drive performance, and return. We're here today to learn about the actions leaders have taken to address organizational change. Today, our guest is Eric Boromisa, Managing Partner at Numbers and Letters Advisory. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Let's begin by having you share with our audience a bit about yourself, your background, and your organization.
Sure. So I run a product strategy advisory firm. So I help companies develop an idea into reality, typically in tech, healthcare, wellness, corporate governance in that area. And I live in Berlin, but I spent 20 years in San Francisco. So I kind of have that transatlantic partnership between the two going on. So for me, it's been a nice road. I've been running my firm for 11 years and I've had about 47 clients. And so it's been a nice road.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. So we'll be discussing 3 questions today as a warm-up to start our conversation. Would you share why you believe a healthy culture is critical?
I get called in for projects all the time and it's, hey, is our product not good? Like, are we missing the market? Are we missing a trend? And I often play the role of corporate psychologist or like therapist for a business. I talk with the executives, I talk with the line level employees, I talk with the people in the trenches, and you start to understand the gridlock. You start to understand the friction that comes with any workplace culture. And so I find that I'm called in for maybe solving a market issue, but I often take some of that feedback or tea leaves, anonymize it and say, go to the board and say, so what I've been hearing is, and that sort of breaks the ice and helps people, no one's to blame in situations where cultures maybe more fractious or has a bit of tension. But I do think that's a necessary thing for a business to be, happy and humming.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. So let's begin with question 1. It's been our experience that leaders tend to struggle in 3 key areas: people, process, or profits. In your role as a strategic consultant, could you identify which of these areas or combination of areas presented a challenge with one of your clients or several clients?
Yeah, actually, I think of one about 8 years ago. I was called in as an industry association. Their profits are great. They were growing. Their performance looked great on paper. Their membership was very engaged. But, I started to talk to some of the folks working there, and I realized there was a big bottleneck in the marketing department. There was various products and content, ideas, but they weren't getting released. And so kind of working through that, I was able to raise it to leadership that there was misunderstanding about what the expectations were to receive a marketing brief, launch a campaign. And so I wasn't even called in for a marketing project. It was actually a product thing, but it ended up being a cultural diagnosis. So to answer your question, it was about the people in that case.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it does sound like it was a people, but it also impacted all the process and the business as well, which was trailing down into potentially impacting the finance. So it's always one of the 3 that impacts the other, or it's all together. And as you looked at that challenge, how did it negatively impact the organization overall?
People were a little scared to bring things to the head of marketing, frankly. There was a little fear there. I think that once the CEO was aware of the problem and was able to coach the person and develop a better way of handling those situations, I think it smoothed out quite a bit. And since then, they've gone on to develop amazing content and they've grown, exponentially since I've left. So I think they were able to actually address those concerns in a very graceful way.
I appreciate that feedback because it's often the CEO suspects or identifies an issue but doesn't know how to really move the issue forward. So having an expert like yourself to kind of help connect the dots is really valuable. So what was the one thing that you identified that helped impact the culture positively, or that you have found impacts that across organizations?
One thing I thought was really impressive while I was there is actually they had a very cross-functional, almost like a skunk works multi-day meeting to kind of reboot the organization, like a 2.0 meeting of the mind. So 50 people came together for 2 days, 3 days. And yeah, it was really interesting to see, from IT, from customer support, from content, from product, from legal, all just kind of brainstorming ideas together. And I thought that was a really healthy way for an organization to sort of look at itself, know what's working, know what's not, and come to some greater ground. And I was really glad to be a part of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy for helping people move forward and recognizing, identifying the problem, and then moving the issue on. So, as we wrap up today, do you have any insight for fellow leaders that you have worked with, or just a general insight to share?
Yeah, I think a lot of people like to jump into business. They're very action oriented or productive. I really think it's important to start with checking in with the person first. I almost always start my meetings and want to have as many people. How are you doing today? Understand if that person has a family or has a aging parent or a pet. What's going on in their life that's not work? Don't be nosy, but like just to understand that you're treat a human in front of you. And I think that's really important to build that trust and be a good leader.
I love to hear that feedback and approach. I think addressing the whole person, but that also impacts into the culture is really critical. Eric, I've enjoyed having you on our Leadership Lovers podcast. Thanks so much for your insights.
Thanks a lot, Will. Great to be here.
Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Lovers podcast. Find all our Leadership Lovers episodes on the Culture Think Tank website at www.theculturethinktank.com or listen on your favorite streaming platform. We'd love to hear from you about the challenges you have faced as a leader. Tune in weekly as we invite leaders to share their experiences in strengthening culture and performance, one action at a time.